Hello, friends. It's time for another installment of Storm Runners by Roland Smith, read with permission by Scholastic. This is hopefully the end of the second quadrant. We'll see if I can get through it. I want to show you a couple of things that we talked about last time. And that is one of the recurring things is what Chase calls a try. And it's not a real word. It's a word that his mother made up. That means it's not completely true, but it's not completely a lie. And so his mom says, nice try, okay? And so right now we're working on repeated ideas. So they repeat time, and there are flashbacks and flash forwards. Lots of unusual things happen. There are tries, and then there's a lot of questions about where will Emily land? So we're talking about 8:20 a.m. and Chase has just started in his new school. Dr. Krupp had put Chase in all of Nicole's classes except for PE, starting with Mrs. Sprague's homeroom. For as much work as they were doing in homeroom, Chase thought they might as well have canceled school. A third of the desks were empty. The television mounted to the ceiling was turned to the Weather Channel. At 8:45, Emily started to move. While everyone stared up at the screen to watch the white whirl of destruction headed their way, Chase looked out the window. This is what people did in the old days before satellite imagery and Doppler radar. And those are interesting things about how they predict the weather that some of you might want to look up and find out some things about. When they'd arrived at Palm Breeze Middle School an hour earlier, the sky had been clear with no wind. Now it was flat gray. Dead palm fronds were tumbling across the soccer field out back. Chase began to get a strange feeling about Emily and wondered if this is what his dad experienced when he made his predictions, or what a lightning rod felt like just before a strike. A tingling sensation, a spark of premonition. Premonition is that itchy feeling you get when you kind of think something's going to happen. Okay, and here once again, when I change my voice, it's because it's the announcer. There's a lot of switching to the announcers, and there's a male announcer and a female announcer, and so I try and make my voice a little bit different. It's not perfect, it's my best try. Last night, Emily was upgraded to a Category 4 hurricane with sustained winds of up to 155 miles per hour. There's a chance she'll become a Category 5, but what's even more disturbing is the speed at which she's traveling. Although hurricane winds can exceed 100 miles an hour, the storm itself usually travels about 15 miles an hour. This is one of the reasons hurricanes cause so much damage when they hit land. Instead of moving through quickly, they linger, giving the high winds time to cause severe damage. Emily is currently barreling towards the west coast of Florida at 35 miles per hour. We have accurate tracking records going back decades. Decades are tens of years, remember? And this speed is simply unheard of. On her current track, the speed she will be making, at her current track and speed, she will be making landfall near the Tampa-St. Pete area around 11 this morning. About 40 miles south of Palm Breeze Middle School, just like Dad predicted. Chase continued to stare out the window. He still had that tingling feeling, and it contradicted what he was hearing from the television and what he was seeing out the window. Although the wind wasn't even close to hurricane strength, he had a weird feeling that Mama Rossi was closer to the mark than his dad or any of the experts. Mrs. Sprague switched the TV to a local station, and a familiar face appeared on the screen. It was the anchor they had watched during dinner the night before. Chase realized why the photos of Dr. Krupp's husband had looked familiar. He turned to Nicole and whispered, "Is that?" "Yeah, that's Dr. Krupp's husband. All the teachers really like him. He comes to talk to us every year." She leaned closer. "I think he's a little strange. He wears more makeup than Dr. Krupp, even when he's just talking to us." Chase doubted that the morning news was Richard Krupp's regular beat. He was a primetime anchor. Primetime means the thing that happens at night, and it's the ones that get paid the most and they get seen the most. Chase and his father always got a big kick out of watching television reporters during disasters. They'd say they hoped the storm would pass them, but the truth was they wanted to be right in the middle of it, with their Gore-Tex gear, leaning into the wind, dodging debris, telling everyone how dangerous it was. If the reporters were unlucky and the storm hit elsewhere, they'd insert themselves into the story by jumping into their satellite vans and driving there, as if the town where the disaster struck actually needed more reporters. And if you ever watch the weather when we have a snowstorm, that's a lot of what happens. They go up into where the snow is so that they can take pictures of it. Richard Krupp wasn't in his Gore-Tex yet. Gore-Tex is a really expensive, really good quality rain jacket. But Chase was certain he would be before long. His hair was a little disheveled, and it looked as if he hadn't shaved since the night before. He was wearing jeans and hiking boots. The sleeves to his sky blue dress shirt rolled up to just below the elbow. Emily loomed behind him in high definition, like a circular saw, looking for something to cut in two. Richard Krupp was unafraid. He stared into the camera, trying to look concerned, but his shining blue eyes gave him away. He was excited. So this author thinks that these particular reporters are excited to be right in the middle of the disaster. What do you think? Looks like we're in for a rough night, but the important thing to remember is not to panic. At this point, state police and local law enforcement are not calling for mandatory evacuation. So an evacuation is when they require you to leave your homes and go someplace else because a storm or something is going to hit. They are suggesting that if you have somewhere to stay outside of Emily's projected track, you should proceed there after securing your property. The news team and I will, of course, be here for the duration. Of course. Chase looked at his new classmates. They were all glued to the screen, hanging on Richard Krupp's every word. Let's go to our meteorologist, Cindy Stewart, in downtown St. Pete, and see what the mood is there. Cindy? As you can see, Richard, a few clouds have moved in, and the wind has picked up slightly. But honestly, if we weren't looking at the satellite images behind you, we wouldn't know that a hurricane was headed this way. Richard Krupp looked irritated. But there is a hurricane coming, Cindy, a big one. There's no doubt about that, Richard, but due to Emily's erratic behavior, we're still unclear where she'll make landfall. Because of the speed she's traveling, even a slight deviation from the path she's on could put her 100 miles away from St. Pete. But not away from Florida. That's right, Richard. She's going to hit Florida. So Cindy is kind of agreeing with Chase's dad at this point. And Cindy is agreeing with Mama Rossi at this point, and Richard is agreeing with Chase's dad. Once again, they don't know who they're agreeing with, but it's sort of coming down into two camps. Where will Emily land? And that's one of the things that's repeated. Richard gave her a triumphant look. Cindy rolled her eyes slightly, but continued to smile. Chase was beginning to really like her. He would love to see these two in the news station lunchroom. He suspected that their relationship was a lot worse off the camera. So is there anyone downtown making preparations for the storm, Cindy? Yes, there's a lot of activity down here. As you attempted to say earlier, it doesn't hurt to be cautious. The camera zoomed out and Chase's jaw dropped open at what he saw on the television screen. MD Emergency Services. The camera zoomed back a little more, revealing John Masters leaning against his 4x4. Nicole turned to Chase and said loudly, "Isn't that your father's truck?" "Yeah," Chase said, "and that's him leaning against it." The whole class stared at him. "Your dad's hot," a girl said. "What's that hanging around his neck?" someone else asked. If Chase could have climbed out the window without anyone noticing, he would have. So he's feeling kind of embarrassed, isn't he? "It's a cell phone," Chase answered. "That's kind of geeky. He's still hot." Chase had never thought of his dad as hot, but he had to admit that except for the cell phone around his neck, his dad did look pretty good. He was wearing faded jeans, scuffed work boots, and a sleeveless t-shirt that showed off his tan and well-defined biceps and forearms. Strapped around his narrow waist was his favorite tool belt. Mrs. Sprague turned up the volume. "Settle down, everyone. Let's hear what Chase's father has to say." Chase wasn't sure what to expect, but his father looked perfectly at ease in front of the camera, as if he'd been on TV every day of his life. He hadn't even been on the local news after the lightning strike. Dozens of shows had called asking him to appear, but he had turned them all down. Chase had thought at the time that his father was camera shy. That means he doesn't like to have his picture taken. He was obviously wrong. I'm standing next to John Masters, owner of MD Emergency Services. What are you doing down here, John? Helping out, making sure the damage will be minimal if Emily hits here. What makes you think Emily is going to hit St. Pete? She may not, but she is headed this direction, and this is where I happen to be. And why do you happen to be in St. Pete? I've never been here before. Always wanted to come. Bad timing, I guess. Bad try, Dad, Chase thought. And so we're going here to tries again. That would be something under tries. Chase's dad is telling the truth, but not quite the truth, right? That's not really why he's there. Show us what you've been doing. Chase's father walked Cindy through taping and boarding up windows, securing or removing anything that might get caught by the wind, moving the valuables to upper floors. In case of a storm surge? That's right, Cindy, just like we saw in Hurricane Katrina. If your house or building is standing after the wind, flooding is the next problem. Water damage can be worse than wind damage, much worse. And with all of the oil floating around the Gulf from the BP spill, there could be a real mess here on the shore. The BP spill is an interesting part of history. A whole bunch of oil spilled out of oil tankers. That might be something you'd like to explore and read about a little bit. The interview was interrupted by the voice of Mrs. O'Leary over the intercom. She called about 20 students down to the office, saying their parents were waiting to pick them up. 4 kids from Mrs. Sprague's class. By the time they gathered their things and left, Richard Krupp was back on the screen. He was trying to look worried, but brave. So now they're still at school. It's the same day, but it's a little bit after noon. Chase called his father during lunch. He answered on the first ring. 12:15, how's it going? You're right about the time, and I'm fine, Chase said. I saw you on TV. At school? Yeah, in a classroom. That must have been a surprise. It was. Chase wondered if his father would have even told him if he hadn't mentioned it first. Cindy Stewart seems cool. She is. It doesn't sound like she thinks Emily is going to hit down there. She might be right. And if she is, we might have to move the shack and shop closer to Emily's track. Tomas and I will stay here tonight, but if Emily misses us, we'll be heading up your way first thing in the morning to get you and pick up the rigs. Great, Chase thought. That's a new record. 1 day in one school. That might not be as easy as you think, Chase said. What do you mean? The clouds have moved in and the wind's been picking up all morning. Chase hesitated. I think Emily is going to hit up here. This was followed by a long pause on his father's end of the line. It went on so long that Chase thought the call had been dropped. Are you there? Yeah, I'm here. What other evidence do you have? Nothing scientific, if that's what you mean. Chase didn't want to get into Mama Rossi's feelings. It's just a feeling I have. Have they canceled school? No, but a lot of parents have picked their kids up. The principal is married to that Richard guy on TV. His father laughed. Cindy's not too fond of him. You should have heard what she had to say off camera about St. Pete's #1 news anchor. What about Emily? Chase asked. I don't know. They're still predicting that it's going to hit down here, but at this point, your guess is as good as anyone else's. You want to head up tonight? I guess not, Chase said. You're already set up down there. If you come up here and I'm wrong, you might not be able to get back in. Roads were often closed during a disaster, which was why his father liked to be at ground zero beforehand. Ground zero is a word that means the place that the disaster hits. Okay? You know the drill. If you think someone's making a bonehead decision, don't go along with them. Remember that you've had more experience with storms than they have. Stick with what I've taught you. Do what you think is right. If the storm hits up there, save yourself. You're no good to anybody else if you're dead, including yourself. Chase could not remember how many times his father had said these exact words to him. I will. His father continued in a lighter tone. I didn't get to ask you this morning, but what's the farm like? It's a circus. Wild, huh? Literally. It was obvious his father had no idea what Chase meant. And that's another one of those word plays. He's saying it's a circus, and he means it's literally a circus farm. But when you say something's a circus, you can mean that it's kind of a mess. That's great. Well, I better get back to work. Keep an eye on the weather. Call me this evening. He ended the call. Nicole walked up. Who were you talking to? My father. What did he say about his television appearance? Not much. He's probably used to it by now. As far as I know, that's the first time he's been on TV. Really? I would think he'd be on all the time considering what he does for a living. It's now or never, Chase thought. No more tries, especially with Nicole. So he's saying, okay, that's it. I'm going to tell Nicole the exact truth. And so that goes under the repeated idea of tries. How long before we have to be back to class? About 20 minutes. Why? Chase started with his mother's and sister's death, then moved on to the lightning strike and MD emergency services, and ended with their arrival at the Rossi brothers' winter quarters. He skipped a few things, like his father storing away all the evidence of their former life. Nicole listened without saying a word until he was finished. I've never met anyone struck by lightning. That's not surprising. Most people don't survive lightning strikes. Believe me, it's no fun to see someone struck by lightning. Especially your own father, Nicole said. Does he have any other ill effects from the strike? Excuse me a minute. I should have brought in a glass of water. I should have brought a glass of water. You mean besides selling everything we own, becoming a nomad and charging desperate people a ton of cash to help them? Nomad means somebody who moves from place to place. Nicole grinned. Yes, besides that. Well, when he got out of the hospital, he got his ear pierced. Nicole laughed. That sounds more like a midlife crisis, except for the fact that he had a jeweler melt down his gold wedding band and turned it into a lightning bolt earring. Well, that is a little strange, Nicole admitted. So that goes with unusual things that happen. All right, we're in the afternoon of this day, 3:33 p.m. And do you know what? I'm looking at the time and I'm thinking that I'm not going to be able to finish it on this day. So I had planned for you for tomorrow to read an article about hurricanes, and I'm still going to have you do that, but there'll be a few minutes left of this chapter tomorrow on a video. So I'm going to stop the sharing and I'm going to stop the video and I'll read to you again tomorrow.